So I intentionally made that talk short because I know that we're going to want to have time for questions and whatnot. And I will say, a big crowd, we may not have the time to get everybody. You can come to me later on and we can have a discussion. But I will demand respect and I will demand logical questions. Any personal attacks or histrionics, I'm going to shut you down. Okay? And we can talk later. So let's have some good discussion. Yes, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but earlier in your speech you said that the purpose of marriage, one of the purposes was procreation.
One of the purposes, yes.
And sorry, can you list what the other one?
It would be the unitive aspect to bring a stability for the man and the woman in their own lives, particularly for the rearing of offspring, as we've seen sort of from in a human evolutionary sociological perspective.
Okay. A common argument I don't believe you addressed was what about heterosexual couples who cannot conceive?
It's a very good point. I was going to, but I had to talk. I talk to college students all the time. And so, Father, you got to make it a little less long for high school students. Not that you're very dumber or whatever. They're probably much more smarter than a lot of college students, but that's a good argument. What the argument is basically, well, what about infertile couples? Well, why should they be allowed to get married? Well, what you're doing is you're comparing apples to oranges. Okay, I'm going to give this analogy so people freak out about it. But you got to push your personal opinions aside. When I say that a heterosexual couple is infertile, that means they can't have children. But naturally, if they follow the act through, they would normally be able to have children. There's something wrong, maybe a low sperm count, maybe not enough eggs, I don't know what it is, that makes it difficult for them to have children. But the act is still the same. So what we would say is that they are secondarily infertile. They still have the substance of what it takes to make a child. Under normal circumstances, they could have a child. They could take medicine and have a child, possibly. But when we come to a homosexual couple, the act they engage in is per se, in and of itself, incapable of bringing forth a child. We can call it infertile, but it's not proper. Or we can, because let's say that I say, this mug is infertile. This mug cannot have children. Is this true? It is. It can't. But it doesn't make any sense because it doesn't have the potential in itself, under normal circumstances, to bring forth children. Impossible. And so, the same thing goes with homosexual sex. It does not, in and of itself, have the possibility of bringing forth children. Can't. Never will. Never able to do it. So there is that difference. It's apples and oranges. It seems to make the same sense. So just like it doesn't make any sense to call this infertile, it doesn't make the sense to call homosexual sex infertile because it doesn't have potential in and of itself to give forth children, while heterosexual sex does in and of itself have the potential to do that. Yes, ma'am.
So I understand why the church's position is that homosexual marriage is incompatible because it's the sacrament of marriage and we as a church see it as a sacrament.
Okay, that's the church's position, but we're not going to superimpose this on a culture.
Okay, right.
Not at all.
That's my question is I understand like that argument, but then why is a civil union not acceptable? Because the state, the country, doesn't have that same definition of marriage.
Okay, very good. That's why, did you hear me bring up the Bible at all? No, I didn't. I didn't talk about the sacrament. I never will. Because we do believe in the sacrament of marriage. But my argument is based in nature. That nature, not nature like animals running around the forest, but the natural ends written into the body. That the sexual organ has a purpose that's written in nature that is even evolutionarily necessary, that a government has the responsibility to respect that. It's the same thing with abortion. I don't want you to impose your religion on me. No. I can show you from science that's a human being, and that a government ought to respect the natural rights of the child to live from a purely biological order. So the same thing with marriage. All we're saying is that the government ought to respect the natural order and the meaning of sexual difference. It doesn't have the power to redefine marriage. Because if you're saying the government has the power to redefine marriage according to its own whim, it can redefine anything. It can redefine your religious freedom. It can redefine when life begins. It can redefine when life ends. And that's what the government's doing right now. And people are not paying attention. They're taking more and more power away, and they're beginning to level it. So this is when life begins. This is when you can do this. This is when you can't do that. Instead of respecting the order of nature, And that's what we call soft totalitarianism. And that's where we're headed, people. Let's start thinking about things. So that's the argument. We would say the government doesn't have the power to do that. If you allow civil unions, why not allow polygamy? What's wrong with that? The government should allow that too. You've removed the natural standard. It should allow everything. You should be able to allow marry your brother. That becomes something I don't think people want, but then they become bigots and hypocrites. Because the standard they're using to say we want it is marriage equality. We shouldn't discriminate. Well, then why can you discriminate those people? That's bigotry. I think a lot of people who do advocate it, and this is charged language, fall into the trap of bigotry because they're choosing who they want to discriminate against. I'll go back to you.
Do you believe as a matter of policy we should do away with civil unions, or should that be allowed under law because it doesn't conflict with the definition of marriage?
Well, I think that's splitting hairs, to be technical. I don't agree with civil unions because what it ultimately does is, first of all, why are you saying you people are not good enough for marriage, so we're just going to give you this? I think it's degrading to homosexuals to say we're just going to give you that as like a little concept, like the Ginsu steak knives because you don't win the first prize. Number two, it's just you're using two different terms. It has all the same benefits and everything else as marriage. You're calling it something different. No, I don't think that works because then you have to allow civil unions. Why can't I, for tax purposes, marry my brother because he's having a hard time finding a job, or why can't I marry my dad so that he can escape the inheritance tax? I'm his son now. We'll just do a civil union for tax codes. It opens up so many other possibilities that become very, very problematic. I think it's just messing around with words, so I don't buy that, no.
So what would be the best way to respond to someone who uses the word gay in an offensive term, or uses an offensive term to describe homosexuality as a Catholic?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think we're supposed to be loving. I come from a generation where we don't take things personally, okay? And I don't want to push it on you. So I hear people make fun of Catholics all the time. I don't really care. I mean, is it wrong? Yeah, but am I going to lose sleep over it? No. I can't put my point on you. The only thing that I never get offended, personally. I just never do. If you're going to attack me, then I might get offended. But you just want to say something like that, it doesn't bother me at all. But yeah, it may with you. I think you say, listen, you may tell the person very charitably, listen, this is offensive to me. Would you mind respecting me and not using that term around me? And hopefully the person would say yes. But that's what I would suggest. Again, we get into the discussion of what kind of language should be used or not be used. But I do see the point. But I think it begs a deeper question, which is about then, I mean, is it really proper to call someone gay? Is it proper to say someone is a homosexual, or is it more proper to say there's a person with same-sex attraction who experiences same-sex attraction? Should we self-identify with those attractions? My opinion is no, we shouldn't. And I think that's a big part of the problem. We as humans have all sorts of attractions that are not ordered towards the proper end, male to female, that we don't self-identify. And I don't think there's any evidence genetically or scientifically that says we should self-identify. That brings up a different issue.
Like a lot of times when discussing same-sex marriage with another person, they say, well, it doesn't affect you. You're not homosexual, so why do you care? And then if you would say, well, like it's changing laws, and they would say, yeah, but you don't need to worry about that because like you're not going to get married, like you're not homosexual. Like what's a good argument against?
That's a good. There are other arguments, and that is a good one. One of it doesn't affect you. Well, first of all, it does because you're changing public policy. It does affect me, and it can affect particularly religious freedom, my ability to talk whether or not that I think homosexuality is a sin or not. It'll change tax code. It will have a very, very profound effect. It will also have a profound effect on the children that teachers will be teaching, all this kind of stuff. So just to say it doesn't have an effect, again, that's begging the question. It does have an effect, and we can prove that it has an effect. Second, there are a lot of laws, and again, off the top of my head, I'm having a hard time thinking of it, that like drug laws. Well, what do the drug laws matter to me? I don't do drugs. No. Or rape, I'm not raping people. What do the rape laws matter to me? No, that's a narcissistic, very small-minded way of seeing things. There are a lot of laws that don't directly affect me, but I think that are good because they benefit the whole of a society.
So my girlfriend's mom is like really, really big on marriage equality, if I were to get in like an argument with her about it, how would I get out without ruining the relationship?
Well, how about this? I'm going to be very honest with you. Let's say, granted, you're walking there and you see some guy. How tall are you?
I'm 5'8".
How much do you weigh?
30.
Let's say you met a 6'4" guy who's 250 pounds, totally ripped. Would you pick a fight with that guy? Probably not. And you could be David and put that rock right through his head. I probably wouldn't pick a fight with her about it because you maybe don't have the tools necessary to beat her in it because she may not have you may have the reason logic, but
If it happened, how would I get out?
well, I would say that's a very good question. First of all, I would not get it in the first place, but I would simply say, well, you imagine, well, tell me why, and then let's see whatever answer she has, and then sharpen your skills enough to respond. The book that I suggest is called what is it called? What is Marriage? Man and Woman in Defense. What is Marriage? By a guy Ryan Anderson, Sheriff Girgis, and Robert P. George. You can get it on Amazon. You get the Kindle edition. Very easy to read. What I would do is maybe say, this may really make her mad, give her a copy of the book and say, why don't you read this book and you come back and you tell me. But it's called What is Marriage? It has every argument and it doesn't mention God or Jesus or the Bible once. And
How big is it?
100 pages, pretty easy to read. I mean, pretty easy to read. It's a good challenge, but it lays out all the best arguments.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, what should we as faithful Catholics who want to be in union with the church, and yet at the same time want to be sensitive to people around us? How should our consciences be formed in this regard?
Well, I think your conscience should be formed according to the natural law. And again, we're just living in a time where people are very sensitive. Sometimes we may need to push their buttons a little bit. It's like the person who's an alcoholic who thinks that I should just drink and do whatever I want to do. We realize it's not good for them. Sometimes we need to sit them down and say, I love you, but hey, this is not the best for you. They may get mad at you, but you got to speak the truth. Always in love, never judging them, never ridiculing them. But I think a big part of it comes what I'm going to talk about the next time, which is the talk that probably should have come before this one, of where does homosexuality really come from, and what is it as a social and ethical phenomenon. If we can understand that better, it puts this in a better perspective. That's my suggestion. Anything else? So listen, if anybody wants to talk personally about this issue, I'll be around. I'm doing some work on my phone with a big project back at home, but I'll be around. Feel free to come talk to me. I'm not going to judge or condemn, but I want y'all to think. See y'all later.